Okay, so we gotta get you a skill, obviously. Cause rapping ain't gonna cut it, cause can't get you a studio. We can't get you booked. So right now, we're gonna try to get you a job. Anything in mind? Well, actually, I actually started a job. Oh, really? What is it? Truck driver, delivery service. Oh, wow. I didn't even know you had your license. Well, that's the thing. I don't. Ooh. Hello, one. Hello, all. It's the most Ed Netty, ghost of them all, Caspa in the flesh. And it's time for a review of Billie Eilish, Hit Me Hard and Soft. This is the third album from singer, songwriter, keyboardist Billie Eilish, teaming up once again with her brother and producer Phineas, debuting with their excellent When We Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go debut album, which I thought was very zany, very dark, very creative, and definitely very much an obscure piece from what we would normally get from the mainstream at that time, which how wild and dark the highlights of that album were. And how with that album proving the naysayers wrong. Because when she first came in, I found her style a little bland, a little forgettable, but completely blew me out of the water with her debut album, and definitely made me a fan. And her sophomore album, Happier Than Ever, which I enjoyed, but I couldn't ignore the inconsistencies that album had, where they were pulling out interesting production choices, where Billie was definitely showing her writer chops as she did on her debut, but I do feel the inconsistency with the sonic nature of the album, how it would go from very bland production choices to obscure production choices, and honestly it gave me the feeling of this album doesn't know what it wants to be. And with this album here, there was really no singles going into this, so I pretty much went into this thing blind because I had no idea what to expect due to the fact there were no teasers for this album. I will say though, this album does keep a very dark, aquatic aesthetic like you're seeing on the cover here. And unfortunately, we don't get a lot of quirky bops like we normally get from Billie, but I do feel that there is maturity here, but I do feel there is maturity within the songwriting, mostly within the ballads, which we'll get into. But the song Lunch, which definitely shows Billie in her bag here, which is a new synth funk munch anthem. Yes, I said synth funk munch anthem. And I feel there are tracks here that do call back to the debut, but we only get like a handful of those, unfortunately. And I don't think this album really ends as strong as I would have liked it to, mostly due to the very dull progression. But there is one track here where I do feel the switch up changes off, and boy does it ever. On the track L'amour de ma vie, I hope I'm saying that right, which has the most unexpected beat change, but it's very rewarding. As Billie goes from this beautiful, loungy, spilling her heart out, but also being very cheeky as well, saying like, my mistake was telling you you were the love of my life. So basically pulling the rug up from someone who she bigged up to be this amazing person, but really Billie was like secretly falling for this person, but then as soon as she did that, boosted up this person's head and then ended up hurting her in the process and really exiting this very toxic relationship. And I feel that the outro here is a celebration of that goes into this epic, irresistible dance pop beat with glistening synths and thumps and fat bass. It really proves Billie and Phineas really have what it takes to keep a track interesting. So it really puzzles me why after this cut, they just sonically phone it in. I would say the opener isn't necessarily fireworks, but I am empathetic to Billie and saying how people are like focusing on her weight loss, and even within the weight loss, she still doesn't feel pretty. It really does shine light on the body shaming controversy that she shouldn't have even had in the first place. And even though I'm not crazy about the opener, it does consistently keep the dark, watery production aesthetic. And one thing people may not realize is the bits of melody that do play into one of the best tracks on this album, the greatest when it comes to the hook melody. I guess I wish the opener developed more, and that's kind of how I feel about Chayorio. That just edges for the climax as you hear these synths just pumping, but not really going much of anywhere, not really building into anything epic. And the hook does come off as dressing room fodder, unfortunately. And although I dig the callback to Diner as an idea, it really leaves a lot to be desired in execution. With these laughy keys and heavy synths, it just sounds so fucking goofy. Like, I feel like it really fails at trying to go back to the genuine creepiness and uneasiness that Billie brought to her debut, but this one just sounds really wonky. It honestly just feels like they're doing a parody of the strengths they had on the debut. And the song Bittersweet shows her borrowing from Kanye once again in a very uninteresting way in terms of the synths. And while it is multi-phased, I feel I'm just getting this buffet of endless bland dishes after another. It's like the choices are just too lax for me, and the closer doesn't really give me anything at all. Although lyrically she does call back to Birds of a Feather, which is one of my favorite tracks on this album, it doesn't develop into much of anything and just leads for an underwhelming closer. But aside from that, I do feel that we get the best 4-track run on this whole album, with some of Billie's best sung and most dramatic and moving tracks yet. Like, her balladry game is so on point here, and that's where I feel the maturity has entered here. On Birds of a Feather, where she's showing her undying commitment to a partner with lyrics like, I want you to stay till I'm in my grave, till I rot away dead and buried, till I'm in a casket that you carry. But as the lyrics carry on, it definitely leads to a very different scenario. Then we have Wildflower, which shows Billie reflecting on a past lover with very heartfelt, vivid lyrics, as it shows this reassurance for affirmation of love from this past person. And I love how layered the ghostly vocals are. And I love how lush and full the track sounds when it picks up, with the drum fills and the twangy Spanish guitar strums. And there's also Greatest, which has the most epic build on the whole entire album, with tragic lyrics of not reciprocating the same love and admiration and passion you would give someone. It's a very heartbreaking song, probably one of the most heartbreaking songs Billie has ever come up with, but by far the most powerful song like she's ever sung. And Billie and Phineas really sell it here, especially with how Billie builds up the emotion, with the vocals coalescing with the guitars, the explosion of drums and strings, and walls of soaring vocals. So yes, there are moments here where Billie has matured, I would say, in terms of balladry, but on the other hand, there are tracks where I feel she has regressed, and it really hurts to say. I feel like this would have been greater if we had more tracks with more of her strengths, because I feel Billie really has it in her. And apparently this is supposed to be the sister album to the sophomore album, but this thing, it's kind of scant a bit. And I definitely expected more from Billie here. Not saying I hated this album, but I'm not saying I love it either. I'm feeling a 3.5 out of 5 on this album. But if you've given this a listen, what did you think of it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Why? And that's it. Caspa, Gothic Ghost, Billie Eilish, Hit Me Hard and Soft. Till we meet again.